I think people get angry with bad first drafts because they look at their writing and they don't see how they can take that first draft from the horrible writing it might be to writing that flows and touches the reader. Welcome to How to Write Good. I am your host, Daniel Poppie. You can find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. If it is your first time here, How to Write Good is a writing podcast that seeks to find principles and advice that can be applied across a broad range of writing situations. If you've been here before, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button below, and share. So you might be at a point in your writing where you've slogged through your first draft. And in a lot of cases, it does feel like the first draft is a slog. Even the best writers who've come about in the history of the world have used colorful language to describe what first drafts are. And you can look up those yourself. So I don't think you should feel bad. Now, I've talked about in the past how getting to the end of a first draft of a book is just the first step in a journey. And you've actually got a huge chunk left. And that might be demoralizing to some people. And I know some people who find editing to be the worst possible thing in the writing process. Everybody's got their favorite different little pieces. But I think that part of the reason why people find editing so difficult is because they don't understand the process of editing. They don't understand the process of editing the way someone who's really skilled in writing understands that process. So I've talked about strategies to keep yourself from going insane when you're writing, and I've talked about strategies to keep yourself from going insane when you're editing as well. But I haven't talked about the nitty-gritty of editing. I haven't given you something that will allow you to engage with specific paragraphs or specific chapters. And that is what I'm trying to do today. Now, I'm not going to be explaining the nuance of every single paragraph that you're going through. That would take far too long, so I'm still taking a broader overview of editing and figuring out how to get from that rough draft to a final draft. But I think this overview is going to help you look at your editing in a different way. I think it's going to help you switch from a more novice approach to editing toward an approach that I think will help you become an expert writer. So there's a lot of stuff you can do when editing any portion of your book. And I don't know if this is the exhaustive list, and you could probably sit down and decide what the exhaustive list is, but there's different things you can do, such as replacing words, replacing sentences, replacing whole paragraphs. You can restructure sentences, you can restructure whole paragraphs, move things around. You can move a specific word around, you can move a specific sentence around, you can move whole paragraphs around, you can move even full chapters around within a book. And then there's taking things out completely. One aspect of writing that many authors say they do is moving commas around. And I think moving punctuation or changing punctuation is actually a very minor thing within good writing. Every writer wants the words to flow the way in which they think them. They have a specific idea of how they want those words to come across to the reader, and they're trying to put those words together in a way that will come across to the reader in the way the writer intends those words to be understood. Punctuation is meant to allow that to happen. Punctuation is a small factor that allows that to happen. It tells readers when to start and stop. But I think punctuation is something that is added on to what you've already written rather than a core feature of the writing, if that makes sense. And maybe I'm going a bit too far with that. I think you should have punctuation in your writing, but it is something that will naturally follow what you're already writing. It'll naturally follow the rhythm of what you're writing. So I think it's better to focus on the different parts of editing rather than the punctuation, because you can always fix the punctuation after you're finished with everything else. Now, I do think it's good to understand where things should be used, but I don't think that should be the focus of how you learn to be a good writer. So you've got all these tools. You've got all these things you can do with your writing. You can replace words. You can restructure your sentences. You can take a whole entire paragraph or 16 paragraphs out of your writing completely. But what do you do with these different things? Well, I can't tell you exactly what to do because I can't see your writing and I can't see your writing style. right? So if I could see your writing and I could see your writing style and I could see your intention, I could say, hey, this is going to work out really well. Or I could tell you, hey, try this or try that. But I'm not right next to you to help you write. I can't be a writing teacher for you. But I think there's something you can do that will be much more beneficial. So recently I started to learn how to code. And when you start learning how to code, there are actually two different things you can practice code within. There is one program that allows you to write multiple lines of code and save all those lines of code to create a program. And then there is another program that you can use that allows you to test out different lines of code. It's more like a playground. It doesn't save anything. It's not meant to have something saved from it. It's just meant to test things out. I think you need to adopt something similar to this when you're doing your editing. You need to have your basic draft. You need to have what you're working off of, but you need to also have a playground where you can test different things out within your writing. This could be an extra notebook. For me, I actually use 2 different Word documents. I have them pulled up at the same time. And what I do is I play around with each paragraph. I test where each paragraph is going. And if I have enough time, I can get each paragraph to the point where they're the best I possibly can make them. Again, I don't think it's necessary that you have 2 Word documents or 2 Google Docs up at the same time, but I think it is necessary that you separate your final draft or something that is more concrete from something that you can change, right? And I think the reason why you actually need to take on this idea when you're writing is because writing is very malleable. There's multiple different ways you can do things, and the only way you're going to be able to learn how to do something in writing is if you're actually playing around with the words, if you're actually playing around with your sentences and sentence structures. You need to have a place you can play with what you're working on. And what you do when you're trying to take your first draft and turn it into a final polished product is take each paragraph and then play around with that paragraph until you have a satisfactory paragraph that you like. You keep on moving things around, you keep on changing words, you morph the paragraph into what you want, and then you move on to the next paragraph. And you do the same thing with the chapters, you do the same thing with the entire book. And you might think that sounds like a lot of work. And I don't know if I'd call it a lot of work, but it is a long amount of work, if that makes sense. I differentiate a lot of work and the length of time it actually takes to do something because I don't actually think it's difficult to play around with a specific sentence or paragraph structure, but I do think it takes time to get to the point where you can create something that is good, if that makes sense. But I think this aspect of play, like I said before, is essential. So what if you can't tell if your writing is good or bad? This is an issue to a certain degree. I do not think that you should stop playing around with the language just because you think your writing is bad or just because you can't identify whether your writing is good or bad. But I go up to the line that says you need to be able to identify good writing to be a good writer, but I don't cross that line because I actually don't know if that's the case. And there are situations when I have written and read the thing I've written immediately after and thought it was a terrible piece of writing, but then I give it a few days, I allow my body and mind to relax, and I go back to that writing and I find that it is actually very good. I say it is almost essential, if not essential, for writing because if we do not know where we're going, it is going to be much harder to get there. What I suggest, if you have an issue identifying whether your writing is good or not, is to start reading like crazy and read books of authors that you think are excellent writers. Now that sounds contradictory because how are you going to identify whether those writers are good? The best writers I found are the ones that make you forget about their writing, the ones that suck you in to the book that you're reading. So look out for those books and those authors and read those books and read those authors. And I think you'll actually develop an ear for what good writing is, especially if you're trying to practice being a better writer at the same time. If you can tell whether your writing is good or bad, I would first suggest making sure that you are harsher on yourself than anybody else. This ensures that if you put something out into the world, it is going to be the best you're able to create. My second suggestion then is to just address each paragraph to determine how you are doing in each of those paragraphs. And then when you find paragraphs that you have issues with, to play around with those paragraphs until you get to the point where you find it satisfactory, where you actually find the paragraph flows, fits together, and says what you want it to say. Now I just want to say one more thing. Some people are better writers than others, and in some cases it's just luck. But in a lot of cases, I think it's because these people have put in a lot of time in writing, and they've actually taken the time to play around with the language to the point where they understand how it works and they understand what they can do with it. On a day-to-day level, I think about how language works. It's not just something I jump into and jump out of. When I talk, I think about what I'm saying. I think about how those words go together. I think about the origins of the words. I mostly think about how the words go together and how they convey that specific meaning and how I can make it better. But it is almost never the case when I'm not engaging with the language. And if you want to be a better writer, I think that you need to engage with the language, with the writing, and with how all those things work together to bring about communication. So like I said before, I don't think it's a hard road. I think it can actually be a very relaxing road if you choose to see it in decades rather than years or days. But it is a very long road. It takes a long time for a lot of people to get to the point where they are proficient or even excellent writers. And I just want you to know that because at least you know what you're in for. Of course, you do not have to be the best writer in the world to write a book and get it published, but you do have to be proficient. So I'll leave you with that. If you enjoyed this, you're probably wondering how you can support me. Well, you can actually do two simple things. Follow the first link below to grab a copy of my book, and then follow the second link and sign up for my newsletter. It's that simple. Those two things will mean the world to me and give me more time to write books and create content for you. As always, my name is Daniel Poppie, and this is How to Write Good.